Hello everyone, welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS and welcome to the big news of the day. In this session, we shall talk about the ongoing crisis in the African country of Sudan, and we shall talk about a unique tribe from Karnataka called the Haki Piki tribe, as several members from this tribe are trapped in Sudan. Now, before we take up this important discussion, we have an important announcement. As part of Target Prelims 2023 free crash course, we shall be providing free All India mock tests for your practice for the upcoming prelims. It will be starting from this Sunday. Please register yourself by using the link provided in the description below. And we shall also have the Byju's National Scholarship Test, which will help you win scholarship on our IAS courses up to 90%. So do register yourself for the scholarship test by using the link provided in the description. So now let's come to our topic. Let's understand why Sudan is in news. Why is it relevant for India? Some of you might think the topic is not relevant for our exams, but trust me, any such major geopolitical development involving a civil war-like condition in another country is of great importance for India. India has major interests in Africa. These adverse developments, they directly affect Indian interests. And more importantly, several Indians are trapped in Sudan as the crisis unfolds in the country. So India's Ministry of External Affairs is working hard to work out an evacuation plan and to bring out these Indians safely. And those who are trapped, some of them, they belong to this unique tribe from Karnataka called the Haki Piki tribe. So that makes the topic all the more important for our exams as well. So first, let me set the background. Let me help you understand why Sudan is in this crisis situation. Because without the political background, it will become difficult to understand the whole topic. We'll also look at where Sudan is located. The geography of the place is also very important. And we will examine the unique traits of the Haki Piki tribe. See, Sudan has been going through civil war conditions from many years, in fact. But the latest clashes which have broken out in the last few days, these clashes are between the Sudanese armed forces, headed by Lieutenant General Abdel Burhan, and a paramilitary group called RSF, or the Rapid Support Forces, which is headed by Mohammedan Dagalo, another military general. So two armed force units of Sudan are fighting against each other, a paramilitary group called the RSF and the Sudanese military. This is a power struggle between the armed factions of Sudan's security forces. Both the sides, they have a disagreement over the proposed transition to civilian rule in the country. Because a few years back, Sudan went through a military coup and Sudan hasn't seen a stable government. The military has been trying to capture power, and this power struggle between the Sudanese armed forces and the RSF paramilitary outfit has escalated in the last few days. Large-scale fighting has broken out, especially in the capital Khartoum and in other key cities of Sudan. So this crisis has escalated very quickly, and Sudan, which is a very large African country, which you see here in the map, has been facing this volatile situation. So in this context, the geography of the place becomes very important. From prelims, you can expect a map-based question on Sudan. Sudan is situated here in the northeastern part of Africa. It has a coastline that faces the Red Sea, the strategic Red Sea, which is a vital link between the Suez Canal here in Egypt, near the Sinai Peninsula, the Sinai Desert. From here, it connects with the Bab el-Mandeb Strait over here. Both are very, very important locations as far as global shipping is concerned. Bab el-Mandeb is this narrow strait here between Africa and West Asia. This is the Gulf of Aden. This is the Horn of Africa region. India has major interests over here. It's a vital shipping route for India as well to connect with Europe. So Red Sea is this narrow water body connecting the Suez Canal with Bab el-Mandeb Strait. This helps India as well to access the Mediterranean Sea and further into the Atlantic Ocean and Europe. So Sudan is this important African country that opens towards the Red Sea. It's a littoral of the Red Sea, and it's a neighbor of Egypt, Libya, Chad, Central African Republic, South Sudan. South Sudan is a new country which broke away from Sudan in 2011. The civil war in the country led to the breakaway of this region, and South Sudan emerged as a new independent country in 2011. Then you have Ethiopia, a major African power, and Eritrea. These are the neighboring countries, and the capital here is Khartoum. And Sudan does have plenty of resources. It's blessed with oil and gas resources, including few other precious minerals. India has major interests in Africa. We have a lot of investments in African countries. We have stepped up our diplomacy as well with African nations, especially since the India-Africa Forum Summit, which was started by then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. India is mainly eyeing resources in Africa, plus we are helping out African countries as well to deal with their developmental challenges. A lot of Indians, they do work in African nations. In East Africa, for example, in countries like Tanzania, Kenya, in Ethiopia, in South Africa, you find a very strong and vibrant Indian community. We do have historical civilizational links as well with some of these African countries. And today, there are a lot of Indian workers who have settled here, who have been working from a long time, and they form a common cultural link. You can find the same in North Africa, West Africa as well. And in Sudan also, you do have quite a few Indians who've been residing here, working here. Some of them have settled as well in Sudan. So the crisis has really escalated in the last couple of days. And the fighting that you have seen recently traces its origin to a military coup which happened in Sudan in 2019. Sudan is not new to these military coups where the military has toppled the government and captured power. Sudan has a history of such military coups. You can see the graph here, over here, the infographic. Since 1950s, Sudan has witnessed multiple military coup attempts. Many of them have been successful. The most recent incident happened in 2019, and the current crisis that you see, the civil war, traces its origin to this military coup which happened in 2019. Until 2019, Sudan was ruled by a dictator, a very popular, notorious dictator, Omar al-Bashir. He has been alleged for committing human rights violations, war crimes, etc. And a popular rebellion had broken out in the country, led by the civilians. Civilians were leading a pro-democracy movement in 2019. They wanted to throw out President Omar al-Bashir, who was an authoritarian dictator. This uprising movement which had broken out was backed by the military rulers, by the military leaders, and they toppled the authoritarian dictator. A military coup was carried out, and the dictator Omar al-Bashir was thrown out of power, and Sudanese armed forces captured power in the country. Following this coup, the civilians did not give up their pro-democracy movement. They continued their pro-democracy protests, and finally the military relented and provided for a transitional government before elections could be held. Before democracy could be ushered in by 2025, the plan was to put in place a transitional government which would have representation from both the military and the civilian leaders. But this transitional government functioned only for a few years, and in 2021, the military toppled this government as well and fully captured power in the country. So back-to-back coups were witnessed in 2019 and 2021. Since the military captured power in 2021 and throughout the transitional government, a power struggle had begun between the two major armed forces or security forces of Sudan. That is the Sudanese military, the armed forces on one side, and this paramilitary group called RSF. This paramilitary outfit has been accused of committing large-scale human rights violations, and a power struggle has broken out between these two security forces. Because see, the plan in Sudan was to transition towards a civilian democracy. Both the security forces have different viewpoints. Especially RSF does not want any civilian government and democracy in the country because it fears that the RSF would be wiped out if a democratic government were to come into power. And they would be held accountable for all the human rights violations, war crimes they have allegedly committed. So that is why it is resisting any transition towards a civilian government. But Sudanese military, which is under international pressure, especially from Western countries like US and UK, it has been even threatened with sanctions, and limited sanctions have already been placed on Sudan. So it was looking to transition towards a civilian democracy maybe by 2025. So this difference of opinion between the two forces has led to a power struggle, and now this has broken out into a civil war where both sides have targeted each other and large-scale violence has broken out in the last 3 to 4 days. According to reports, more than 300 civilians have already been killed, thousands have been injured, and basic services have been completely disrupted. There is no electricity, no water, no food supplies. People are stranded, and unfortunately, one Indian citizen was also killed. Albert Augustine, whom you can see in the image, was killed. He is from Kannur, from Kerala. He was working in Sudan and he suffered a stray bullet injury and he has lost his life already. So India already has taken a hit because of the civil war which has broken out. According to reports and official government data, there are at least 2,000 to 3,000 Indians who are trapped in Sudan. This is according to the Indian embassy. But according to a former Indian ambassador who has served in Sudan, there are at least close to 20,000 Indians who are settled in the country. So the exact numbers are not yet available, but anywhere between 3,000 to 20,000 Indians could be trapped in Sudan. Amongst those Indians who are trapped here, there are 31 Indians from Karnataka who belong to this unique tribe called the Hakki-Pikki tribe. Now the question is, what were they doing in Sudan? And what's the unique features of this tribe, the Hakki-Pikki tribe? Because this has led to a political controversy as well. Former Karnataka Chief Minister Siddaramaiah requested the union government for help on Twitter. As a representative from Karnataka, he tweeted tagging Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, asking for help from the Foreign Ministry to rescue and evacuate the members of Hakki-Pikki tribe who belong to Karnataka. This was met with retaliation, a very hostile retaliation by the Foreign Minister, which has led to a Twitter war between the two leaders. Also, this should be seen in the context of the Karnataka state elections. So, this issue has even acquired an electoral angle in Karnataka. So, that makes the Hakki-Pikki tribe all the more important for the exams. So, let's understand who are the Hakki-Pikki tribe. There's some unique aspects associated with them, so it becomes very important for our prelims. And finally, let's talk about the evacuation efforts as well and India's track record in evacuating citizens who are trapped in these hostile conditions. The Hakki-Pikki is one of the major semi-nomadic tribal communities which can be found in Karnataka. All right? They are actually bird catchers. Their traditional occupation is to catch birds. Bird hunting, bird catching was their traditional occupation. Hakki-Pikki is a Kannada word. Hakki means bird. And Pikki refers to, it's a verb for catching. So their traditional occupation was bird catching and bird hunting. All right? They essentially come from northern parts of India. According to the 2001 census, their population was around 8,400. But over a period of time, they have moved, settled in southern India, specifically in Karnataka. And according to 2011 census, their population is around 11,800 plus. All right? But in 1970s, bird hunting was outlawed. It was banned when the Wildlife Protection Act was introduced. Because bird hunting was a threat to bird conservation. It was a threat to the environment. It was a threat to our biodiversity. Also, this was a period when Project Tiger was launched. Because in many tiger habitats, the Hakki-Pikki tribal communities were found. This was their traditional dwelling space as well. Because of Project Tiger, many of the community members were moved out of the forest areas, the tiger habitat areas, and they were rehabilitated in other areas. So because of Project Tiger, because of the Wildlife Protection Act, these tribal members, they lost their livelihood. Their basic livelihood was bird catching. That's the only thing they knew. Bird hunting was their primary practice, profession. So as this was outlawed, the members of the community lost their traditional occupation. This community is a matriarchal group. That is something very unique about them. Usually in India, most communities are patriarchal in nature. The society in itself is patriarchal, right? Where the male member of the household is seen as the head of the household. But there are few tribal communities where a matriarchal structure is followed, where the female head of the household is seen as the head of the household itself. So Hakki-Pikkis are a matriarchal group, and today you find them mainly in Shivamogga, Davangere and Mysore districts of Karnataka. This is primarily where the community is spread out. And even though they are surrounded by Dravidian languages, even though they are found in southern India, members of Hakki-Pikki tribe, they speak a unique dialect, which is of Indo-Aryan heritage. the language they speak, it has been classified as Wagri by linguistic scholars. This unique language is of Indo-Aryan family. And it is such a rare language, it is spoken by so few people. It is recognized as an endangered language by UNESCO. But members of Haki-Piki tribe, they not only speak their native Wagri language, they also fluently speak Kannada, where they have settled. For interacting with other community members for their day-to-day life, for their business, they frequently speak in Kannada as well. They're quite fluent in Kannada. But their home language, their mother tongue is Wagri, which is of Indo-Aryan heritage. Now let me tell you something that's even more unique about the tribe. The tribe has largely kept to itself. Their interactions with other communities has been quite limited. And whenever they interact with urban dwellers, with people who are more modern and sophisticated, when they hear any fascinating names, they take their names and make it their personal names. Believe it or not, there are members of this tribe who are named Google, Apple, Congress, right? Any fascinating name they find, right? Mysore Park, for example. There are people named after that. Even their documents, their Aadhaar card, their passport will list them as Apple, Google, etc. because they find the names fascinating. That is something very unique about the Haki-Piki tribe. Now the big question, how come the marginalized tribal community, what are they doing in Sudan? Sudan is quite far away from India. What are they doing in Africa? Now this is where you need to understand the impact of our forest environmental laws on this tribal community. Even though the laws were intended with a good intention to protect and conserve the environment, members of this tribe, they lost their traditional occupation in 1970s. When bird catching was outlawed and when they were rehabilitated out of the forest areas due to Project Tiger, they lost their traditional space, their traditional livelihood, right? They had to give up their traditional occupation and they started doing odd jobs like working in agricultural fields like manual agricultural labor. Or they would go around on bicycles in cities and towns, sharpening knives and sickles. This is the prime occupation they took up. Other than this, one important skill the community had was to extract herbal medicines from the forest. They've leveraged their traditional indigenous knowledge and they produce herb-based medicines, herbal medicines, which are seen as part of the Ayurvedic system of alternate medicines. They specialize in this. They're renowned for their traditional indigenous herbal medicines, which they make in the jungles. Now, this has a huge market, not just in India, but abroad, especially in Africa. Africa, which suffers from a number of diseases and health-related ailments and conditions, looks out for cheaper drugs and alternative treatments. So the Ayush form of medicines, which are promoted by India as part of its soft power diplomacy, finds a huge appeal in African countries, along with the generic drugs that we produce. Ayurvedic medicines, especially those produced by the Haki-Piki tribe, has a huge market in Africa, in several African countries. The Haki-Piki tribe, which couldn't make a livelihood in India, as they became marginalized, they became poor, they suffered, right? The pandemic especially took a huge hit on them as well. So members of the tribe have moved out from many years. They've sold their land, whatever belongings they had, somehow got the help of travel agents, and they've been able to travel to Africa to sell their herbal medicines. So hundreds of members of the Haki-Piki tribe, they have moved across African countries, and Sudan is one of their big markets. They make some money, not much, but it is enough for their sustenance. It gives them a better livelihood, better standard of living as compared to what they have in India. So it is economic deprivation which mainly drives the members of the tribe to seek out opportunities in Africa. They're known for their herbal medicine, which has a market in Africa, so they seek out these African countries despite the risks. Be it Sudan, be it Eritrea, be it Ethiopia, they've moved to all these countries, they sell their medicine, some of them settle down as well in these countries. So around 31 members of the tribe are currently stranded in Sudan and they are facing a life-threatening situation along with the other few thousand Indians. So now the big question is, what will India do? India is putting its best efforts possible. It's closely monitoring the situation. The Indian Embassy has issued multiple advisories asking Indians to remain indoors, not to venture out. And the Indian Embassy is in touch with most of the Indian nationals. It has set up WhatsApp groups, used social media to communicate with the Indians who are still present in Sudan, and it has issued all the advisories needed to ensure their safety. More importantly, India is reaching out to all the key powers. See, currently in Sudan, there is no stable government. It's not that we can directly reach out to Sudanese military and armed forces or the RSF. So we can't work out a humanitarian corridor to pull out the Indian nationals. That is why India is talking to other key powers like Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, which have influence over Sudan. And India is very, very close to Saudi Arabia and UAE. US and UK, which have major interests in Africa, especially in Sudan, are also influential in Sudan. These Western countries are considering economic sanctions targeting Sudan's security forces so that the violence can be curbed. So India is talking to US and UK as well to leverage the influence we have with them to work out a evacuation route so Indians can be brought back. Indian ambassador to Sudan has confirmed that India is indeed working on an evacuation plan, but the logistics have to be put in place. Carrying out such evacuations from an active conflict zone is not an easy task. But fortunately for India, we have done this multiple times. So before we talk about India's history in evacuations, now let me just show you the geography of Sudan. This is where the geography becomes important. Now, what are the routes through which India can evacuate the Indian citizens? One, we somehow have to work out a humanitarian corridor in Sudan itself. For that, the fighting has to stop, or Indians have to be brought to the nearest airport, but that seems unlikely. So if that is not viable, then we need to bring Indians out of Sudan, either to any of the stable neighboring countries, maybe Egypt or Ethiopia. We have fantastic relations with Ethiopia and Egypt. Or the other option is for the Indian Navy to reach out into Bab el-Mandeb Strait and deploy its naval assets in the Red Sea, from where we can evacuate the Indian nationals. Or even hire commercial airlines or commercial ships, bring them to Saudi Arabia maybe, and from there bring them back to India. So there are multiple routes that India is trying to work out. Whichever is most feasible, the most safe and secure, India will try to bring them back through this route. But this will require immense coordination between multiple stakeholders. It's not just the Ministry of External Affairs which will play a key role in such evacuations. The Ministry of Defense, the Armed Forces of India, especially the Indian Navy and Indian Air Force, they have the assets which can be deployed in such faraway regions. Indian Navy has warships that can be deployed here. We can pull the Indians back. Indian Air Force has large transport aircrafts like the C-17 Globemaster, through which hundreds of Indians can be airlifted. Right? The Ministry of Civil Aviation and Ministry of Shipping will also get involved because we may require commercial airliners, commercial ships in order to evacuate the Indians. It also requires the efforts of India's intelligence agencies, especially RAW, Research and Analysis Wing, to monitor the situation, generate valuable intelligence, build contacts, and get the required permissions and approvals needed to bring in Indian aircraft and Indian vessels. Right? It's a test of our relations with not just Sudan and the region. It's a test of our ties with other major powers as well, like Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. Both are very influential in the region, especially Saudi Arabia is located right next to Sudan, separated by the Red Sea. So Saudi Arabia will definitely play a big role. That's why India is already talking to both the countries. We're also in touch with US and UK, as I explained. Even other countries like Japan and few European countries are also planning their evacuation. Maybe in a worst case scenario, if India is not able to reach out, we can tie up with the other countries, and through their evacuation missions, we can bring the Indians out. So India is considering all the possibilities as of now. And trust me, these evacuation missions, they are not an easy task. It's a logistical nightmare. Because see, ensuring the safety and well-being of Indians abroad is a duty of the Indian government. It's a responsibility of the Indian government. All right? It's not just a moral obligation, it's a duty of the Indian state. But carrying out such an evacuation, that too from a conflict zone, is extremely risky and dangerous. You not only need great diplomatic skills and contacts, you also require the military assets to deploy into these faraway regions. You will need the ability to coordinate with other countries, various agencies, even private airlines and ships, like I said, right? So it is nothing short of a logistical nightmare. You have to figure out where the Indians are stranded, bring them safely to a common location, pull them out of the country through various routes. But fortunately for India, we have tremendous experience in this domain, more than any other country. because there is not a single country where you can't find Indian workers, right? Most of them move out for better life, for better livelihood, better standard of living. Nothing wrong with that. But quite often they get trapped in these unfortunate situations, especially in West Asia and Africa, in the conflict-prone zones. So every time Indians are trapped, India has carried out several evacuation missions to bring them back safely. All right? In 1990, when Saddam Hussein, the dictator of Iraq, when he invaded Kuwait and led to the Iraq-Kuwait war, later it led to the Gulf War as well, as US attacked Iraq. During this crisis, almost 95,000 Indians, more than 1 lakh Indians were trapped in Iraq and Kuwait, but India successfully managed to airlift them, which in itself was a world record at that point of time. Until recently, this was the biggest ever airlift in human history. India worked its contacts with Saddam Hussein. India's then foreign minister met with Saddam Hussein, worked out a corridor through which Indians could be brought out into Kuwait, Jordan, and other neighboring countries, from where India airlifted thousands and thousands of Indians. This was the biggest humanitarian airlift ever. Then Lebanon went through a similar situation in 2006. It went through a civil war, and 5,000 Indians were trapped in Lebanon. They had to be evacuated through Operation Sukoon by the Indian Navy. Fortunately, the Indian Navy was having naval ships in the same region. There were 3 Indian naval ships participating in a military exercise with European countries. They were coming back through Mediterranean Sea and the Suez Canal. So they were diverted quickly towards the Levant region, towards Lebanon, to evacuate the Indians and as well as few friendly nationals from friendly countries like Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Nepal. So thousands of Indians and other citizens from other friendly countries were rescued under Operation Sukoon. Then Libya fell into a civil war in 2011 as a result of the Arab Spring movement, which had spread all across North Africa and Middle East region. The then dictator of Libya, Gaddafi, was targeted by pro-democracy protesters who were backed by Western governments as well. Western countries led by France, UK, and US even carried out a military intervention. So during this crisis in Libya, 15,000 Indians were trapped. Most of them were nurses from India. The Indian Navy was deployed by the then Manmohan Singh government, along with hiring commercial ships and aircraft to rescue the Indians and to bring them back safely to India. This was another successful high-profile mission that India executed, because see, Libya is located quite far away in North Africa towards the Mediterranean. So this is a projection of your national power. Along with rescuing your citizens and ensuring their safety and well-being, you're essentially projecting your national power, your diplomatic influence, your military power as well. Then in Yemen, the country descended into a civil war in 2014 when Houthi rebels backed by Iran carried out an uprising against the Yemeni government. During this crisis, around 5,000 Indians were trapped, and through Operation Rahat, again the Indian Navy brought back all the Indians safely, and we even rescued thousands of foreign nationals as well. Even countries like US and European countries couldn't reach out to their citizens on time. They all depended on India to rescue their nationals as well under Operation Rahat. Then came the pandemic, where lakhs and lakhs of Indians were trapped in countries around the world because of the lockdown and the travel restrictions. So over a wide sweeping mission called Operation Samudra Setu and the Vande Bharat mission, India brought back lakhs of Indians back home during the pandemic period. Under Operation Samudra Setu, Indian Navy brought back Indians who were stuck in Maldives, Sri Lanka, etc. And under Vande Bharat mission, which was mainly led by the civil aviation industry with coordination of the Government of India and the Ministry of External Affairs, lakhs of Indians were brought back through air bubbles or air corridors that were set up through bilateral agreements with select countries. So this became the biggest evacuation after the Kuwait airlift. All right? Then recently, when Taliban recaptured power in Afghanistan in 2021, several Indians were rescued through Operation Devi Shakti from Afghanistan. And then came Operation Ganga last year in 2022 when Russia attacked Ukraine. Around 20,000 Indians, most of the medical students, were trapped in Ukraine, and through a well-planned exercise, Indian students were brought out of Ukraine, mainly into neighboring countries like Poland, Hungary, Romania, etc. From there, Indian Air Force and few commercial airlines, they airlifted Indian students and brought them back safely to India. So India has a history of such evacuations. We essentially have built that expertise and logistical abilities needed to carry out these long-range, large-scale evacuation missions, right? But unfortunately, we see a trend on social media where a lot of them, they criticize Indians who go abroad, who get trapped in these situations. Many of them, let's say someone questions the government, why the government is late in acting or what the government is doing, right? Those who protect or defend the government's viewpoint, they immediately criticize those Indians who have gone abroad to study, to work, or for some reason. They question why have they gone to these countries? What are they doing there? Why should India rescue them? Now let me tell you, those who believe that, let me tell you why protecting the Indian community abroad is critical for Indian foreign policy. First and foremost, Indian government is not doing charity here. Rescuing Indians trapped abroad is not a charity. It's not an act of charity. It's a duty. It's an obligation of the Indian state. Why? Because the Indian community is contributing immensely to our foreign policy, to our national interests. They are helping in projecting India's soft power influence in countries around the world, right? Today, India receives the world's largest remittances. We are getting more than $100 billion through inward bound remittances, which is crucial for our economy in bridging our current account deficit. Indians who go abroad to work and settle down, right? The money they earn through hard work, they send part of it back to their families in India, which is crucial for building up our forex reserves and to address our current account deficit. Plus, they're acting as cultural ambassadors of India, constantly promoting Indian influence. They even get into influential positions, which gives India a leverage over foreign governments. And more importantly, they gain influence in foreign countries. They gain cultural influence, create a good image, a goodwill, which favors India. This is something you can't buy with money, right? So Indians abroad are playing a critical role in our foreign policy. They're acting as our ambassadors abroad, protecting and projecting India's cultural influence, promoting our interests, influencing foreign governments. There are many countries where the Indian community plays a critical role in their elections. Many of them go on to occupy very high positions as well, right? Many of them enter the bureaucracy, the diplomacy of those countries. They become top diplomats. They become ministers. And Rishi Sunak himself would be a classic example for this, right? The Prime Minister of United Kingdom. There are cabinet ministers in the Canadian government who are of Indian origin. So the Indian community abroad, be it NRIs or those who have settled and taken foreign citizenship as well, right? Inevitably, they play a critical role in our foreign policy by projecting our soft power influence. So India is only fulfilling a duty towards them, right? A moral obligation and a duty, which is to ensure the safety and well-being of the Indian community abroad. Indian community, the Indian diaspora might face a lot of challenges. They might get trapped in these hostile situations, right? There could be a terror attack or civil war, or there could be a full-fledged war breaking out between countries. So rescuing our people, bringing them back home safely is a duty of the Indian government. All right? So let's see where this goes, and one should hope and pray that all the Indians in Sudan who have been trapped, including the Haki-Piki tribe, are safely brought back to India, and most likely India will be carrying out an evacuation mission, and that would be a topic for another big news. So that is it from my side. Hope it was a good session. Do support us by pressing the like button, share your comments, and also subscribe to our channel. That's it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.